welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. Really excited to welcome our guest today, who comes to us from far away. Nick Grono, welcome. Where are you coming to us from?
I'm in London today, Julia. Lovely to be here.
And we're not talking like London, Texas, or London, Ohio, or wherever the hell there's tiny London towns in the U.S.
London,
Truly,
England.
London, England, and I want to say thank you because you've had to stay up late so that you could join us.
Oh, it's not too late. What are we? It's 5:30 here, so very civilized.
After a long day in the nonprofit sector, it probably feels like midnight to you, but we're really excited to talk to you. You represent the Freedom Fund, which does amazing work, and you've just launched a new book, and we're going to get into that. That's really going to help us understand your journey and your observations that you've been thrown into, a lifestyle working in global and international nonprofit work. This is going to be really, really fun because specifically we're going to be talking about purpose, impact, and collaboration. And so I'm so delighted that you would join us, Nick. I'm also delighted that we are joined every day by our amazing sponsors, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, our new episodes just dedicated to fundraising, and that happens every Friday. Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that join us day in and day out, as well as our co-hosts. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, and I have this amazing group of experts from around the country that join us. I'm flying solo today with Nick. And so, Nick, let's get into it. As CEO of the Freedom Fund, you do work all over the country and all over the world. Before we get into talking about your book, How to Lead, talk to us about the Freedom Fund and the vital work that it's doing.
So the Freedom Fund's a collaborative fund working to end modern slavery around the world. And there's some 50 million people in a situation of modern slavery. They might be trapped in sex trafficking or in bonded labor or forced marriage, situations where people are controlled and coerced through violence to provide labor or to provide sex. It's a horrendous crime. And what we do is we work with local organizations, our local partners, more than 150 local partners around the world to combat and change the systems that enable people to be exploited. So it's really powerful work. It's something I'm really, really passionate about. It's quite challenging work, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But I feel deeply privileged to be able to work for the Freedom Fund on this issue.
It's amazing. I mean, you are Australian by birth, living in London, working in communities across the globe. What an amazing trajectory that your life has taken and the differences that you have been able to see and work within.
It's a huge privilege. I never thought this is where I'd end up. I started my life as a corporate lawyer in Australia. I worked in Goldman Sachs, the bank in London, for a couple of years. I went to work for the Australian government. I was chief of staff to the Attorney General there. And then I came to the US and I actually went to public policy school in the US. And that was the beginning of my nonprofit career, or the transition into my nonprofit career.
Amazing. So you take all this education, you take a global view, you take nonprofit work, policy work, and it moves you into how to lead nonprofits. Talk to us about your book, because I want to learn from somebody like you who's had these experiences, right? So talk to us about this journey of your book.
Well, the motivation for the book was, I started working in the nonprofit sector 23 years ago. And as I said, I'd worked in the corporate world and I'd worked in the government world. And there are a few things that struck me. One was that nonprofit leadership is quite different in many respects. I mean, obviously, leadership is leadership to a certain extent, but leading a nonprofit is very, very different in key respects to leading a for-profit organization, particularly when it comes to impact and accountability. So it's quite different, yet there are very, very few books written specifically for nonprofit leaders. And there are thousands upon thousands of books written for corporate leaders, the business world.
Right.
And very little that's targeted, and very little that's kind of practical and targeted, to my mind, at the nonprofit leader. So I thought there was a gap there And there's a real need, because whenever you get, you're dealing with this every single day on your show. Whenever you bring together non-profit leaders, they're always talking about challenges and shared challenges and issues that they need to resolve. There's often a deep relief to find out that others are struggling with the same problems. And so what I wanted to do with the book is kind of pull together some of my experience. And I spoke to a whole bunch of outstanding non-profit leaders from around the world and kind of share some of the challenges, some of my failures and mistakes and things I learned from it and what I've learned from others, and put it together in a book focused on the non-profit leader.
I love it. I also think, Nick, that this is a changing time, because until recently, you had to go to the school of hard knocks. You couldn't really go into higher education and learn about nonprofit management as much as you could for-profit management. Business schools abound, and training programs and internships and all this, that we're kind of turning back into ourselves and saying, we and in the nonprofit sector need to explore this and formalize education in this. It's a remarkable time to be a part of this sector.
Yeah, it is. Business does it better in terms of training and supporting leadership journeys, and particularly big business, right? Thousands of business schools and courses, and an expectation that leaders of big companies, at least, will have opportunities to have that support. And in non-profit space, we often don't have the resources. We don't have the opportunities in the same way, and I don't think we have the same mindset. I think often, and I will generalize, but often I think we don't treat leadership as seriously as our for-profit counterparts do. We often kind of think, okay, well, we'll just promote the program director or the fundraising director into the role, without kind of thinking, actually, what are we looking for in a leader? What kind of skills do we need? And if they don't have them, how can we support them to develop those skills? I think we need to do a lot more thinking about how to support particularly new non-profit leaders. And that's one of the objectives of my book.
I love that you said that, because I think a lot of times you get a label, and especially it can be gender related, like, oh, well, they're just such a nice gal, or they're such a nice guy, they're doing this work. And so they don't need to get a good salary. They don't need to have good benefits, if any benefits or at all, nor do they need to be, put thrust into that training or higher education piece of it. And so I love that you illuminated that, because I think you're absolutely right. If you're a CEO of a for-profit company and you come forward and say, I'm suffering with my mental health, there are resources and you get worked on. If you're that way in the nonprofit sector, a lot of times it's like, buck up. This is tough.
Yep.
And you're dismissed,
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge challenge. And I mean, it's hard because often nonprofits just don't have the resources, but I think there's a role for funders to play here too, right? If you don't support your leader, the organization is going to struggle. And if the organization struggles, your investment in that organization is not going to be as impactful as you would like. So I think there's a lot to be said for a lot more thoughtful investment in nonprofit leaders as a way of, even as a hard-headed way of ensuring a return on your own investment as a funder. And boards should be looking at this. And I just think if the CEO struggles, the team struggles, the organization struggles, those you serve aren't being served as well as they should be.
Right. I love that you said that, because I think we need to be thinking that way about our, donor investments or philanthropic investments, and having these conversations. And I think we also need to set those expectations, for ourselves and our sector. Let's move ahead a little bit and talk about the importance of purpose and impact. I'd like to think that we all know what our mission is, our purpose, but I think that you're going to talk to us and say, yeah, not maybe so much. What does this look like to you, Nick?
Well, I frame it a bit differently. I think I spend a lot of time thinking about the differences between business, corporates, for-profits, and not-for-profits. And we spend a lot of time saying how it's hard for nonprofits because they don't have the resources and they can't pay the same, and all of which is true. But nonprofits have a superpower, which is their purpose, right? Staff are deeply motivated by the sense of working for something that makes the world better, right? There are surveys that say, and surveys of staff in for-profit corporations saying they would sacrifice, the vast majority of staff would sacrifice a significant percentage of their earnings to have more purpose in their work. Well, we all have purpose every single day. your organization may or may not be doing as good a job as it could, but there is no question that nonprofits working on health, poverty, education, discrimination, you name it, are trying to change the world. I can't think of anything that's more motivating. And I don't think we do a good enough job of leaning into that purpose as a way of mobilizing staff, mobilizing funders to drive real change. So I think there's a real power around purpose. And I can't talk enough about the power of purpose and the power of leaning into it to align everyone and push for really impactful change.
I love that you phrased it that way, because I think you're right. I think we don't use that mission driven focus like we should. So I appreciate you bringing that forward. You're out working with organizations around the world, dealing with tough issues. Do you feel like this is in play enough that you're seeing this, or do you feel like this is where that lesson came from and that you're not seeing this being used enough?
I think it varies from organization to organization. You will have had so many leaders on here who are powerful and have a really powerful vision and can mobilize their whole teams behind it. But sometimes I also think you just get so wrapped up in the day-to-day work, and it can be so tough. I go and meet kids who have lived a life of being sexually abused for profit, or have been forced to work in horrendous situations for years and in tremendously difficult circumstances. And you're so focused on this that sometimes you lose sight of the bigger picture about what is our work about. I find it deeply motivating too when work is difficult, right? The power of what we're trying to achieve. I'm often asked, well, isn't it tough? I was in Ethiopia a couple of months ago, meeting women who have been trafficked to the Middle East, who have been horrendously abused. And it's very emotionally, it's really tough. There's a lot of kind of guilt that goes with this too, because, I fly in and then I fly out and they're still dealing with the situation that they're in. But I'm asked, how do you deal with this? And I kind of think, well, across the board, we are making huge change. It can be challenging with individuals, but we are assisting millions of people, right? When you look at the wider communities, to live a life that is more free of exploitation and abuse. And that is just hugely motivating. And whenever I talk internally, when I'm kind of talking, you start with purpose. When you have difficult issues, and you have difficult debates on often complicated issues like diversity, equity, inclusion, or approaches on Gaza, I start with what's our purpose, right? How does that advance our purpose? And that provides a clarity around, I think it provides a clarity about how you best approach these issues.
I love that you said this, because I think that we are seeing such tremendous burnout and we lose such phenomenal talent and leadership because they just get exhausted or, just feel like there's no support and they can't go forward. And they're physically and mentally and emotionally just taken down so that they can't lead. I love that you kind of pulled this back in, because I think this could help a lot of folks to really kind of reset or, kind of navigate through some of these really hard topics. And certainly the area that you serve is one of those incredibly tough areas. I want to move forward a little bit with you and talk about collaboration, because you mentioned something really interesting. You fly in, you fly out, you've got different time zones. My goodness, I'm in the Western United States, you're in London. You're trying to rally all these people and concepts and policies. How does collaboration look to you? What does it look like?
Collaboration is really powerful. It's hard, but it's powerful. And at my organization, the Freedom Fund, there's collaboration at every level. We are what's called a collaborative fund. We have a number of funders who have come together to support a common strategy and pool their funding. Pooled fund, collaborative fund. So that's collaboration from the start. And then we fund over 150 grassroots organizations in clusters. So we work in places like Kenya and Brazil, and there we'll support 10 or 15 organizations to come together because we think there's such a power. It really is a case of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts kind of thing. So collaboration is powerful, but it's hard work. Right? It's hard work. And I just think if you don't understand that, and then because it's hard work, you've got to want to invest in it. And you want to invest in it means you've got to understand the power of it. And the way I think about it is, again, working on slavery, but imagine you're working on hunger or poverty or climate change. These are huge problems.
Mm-hmm.
A small organization or even a big nonprofit is just not going to achieve very much on their own. I mean, when I look at the Freedom Fund, we have a budget of about 25 million US dollars, right? It's not bad. We're, probably the second or third largest anti-trafficking organization working globally. The profits from slavery and trafficking every year are more than $250 billion. So $250 billion, we've got 25 million, right? And we're big in the space. So the only way we're going to achieve change is if we can bring others along with us, if we can persuade them to, join the cause and share knowledge about what works and what doesn't. And that's how we achieve real change. So there's a real power and there's a real incentive for us to invest in collaboration. And I think that's the only way you achieve change at scale in our world.
Do you find that as you're out navigating this topic and working with organizations in service of this, that you're having to spend time educating and talking about what collaboration is?
Yeah, and I don't want to be naive about collaboration, right? I mean, there's a real challenge for nonprofits to collaborate because they often have very limited funding. They're all chasing the funder's dollar.
Money.
There is an incentive to compete.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when we work with clusters of organizations, one way we address that is we make a minimum of 3-year funding commitments. And the commitments are conditional on them coming together in a community of practice. So, that's the only thing we kind of condition our funding on broadly. We condition them on working together, and we give them a period of time to understand that they don't have to fight each other for funding because there's set funding, and that changes the equation when it comes to collaboration. But I also believe, those are organizations we fund. We work with other organizations, and I just think in the end, making the effort to build relationship just pays dividends, even if you are, jostling for the same funding and so on. It doesn't have to be aggressive, and you can achieve so much even if there are other situations where you can't collaborate as closely as you would like. So I just think it's a mindset and a philosophy around kind of generosity of approach that pays big dividends.
Yeah, I think it's a tremendous mindset, and I think it takes it can start small, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to join. It's like the cool kids table in the cafeteria might start off small, and then everybody's got to be at the table. So it kind of is one of those things. What are you seeing the numbers? And this seems like an odd question, but when you speak of collaboration, can it be as small as 2 or 3, or are you thinking that it doesn't work unless you have 5 or 10 or 15 or 50 partners? What are your sense?
I mean, collaboration can be 2 people. We have consciously joined with another organization. We're working in Bangladesh, for instance, and we've constantly joined with another organization who has a really good presence on the ground. So they're called Justice and Care. And we have expertise that is kind of more high level. And it means we're splitting the funding, but we can achieve much more together. So there's collaboration of 2. And then there are other situations, as I said, where with our partners and so on, we bigger collaborations, and we have funders that are collaborating. And then we support kind of convenings in the space, because in the end, if I framed it in the book, I was kind of saying, we exist to kind of make progress on the issue we care about. And that should be the most important metric. And it shouldn't just be about, whether our organization has got bigger or not. And I know that's probably a little idealistic, but if you really care, I really care about trafficking. To me, the most important issue is how do we achieve collectively significant impact on that issue? And the Freedom Fund has a role to play in it, but it's certainly not the sole role. And if there are other ways and other actors that can do it better, then we should be finding ways to work with them and support them.
Right. Well, it goes back to your opening comment, and that is, purpose. Yeah. If you can come back to that and to say, this is what my value is, my sense of mission, I think that's the way to kind of loop that back. It's so interesting to have you join us today. And for those of you that weren't with us when we first joined, Nick's coming to us from London. We're based in the Western United States, the nonprofit show is, and your work takes you all over the world. It continues to pull you in, I would imagine, a lot of different directions, a lot of different cultures, languages, time zones. I mean, everything. Let's talk about some of the other things that you've learned. And I'm really interested to get your opinion about trust-based funding and what you're seeing and how that is moving forward.
So a big topic in philanthropy these days is trust-based giving, and trust-based giving can sound jargonistic, but if you're an NGO, you want the funding with the minimum restrictions possible, right? It's like, I'd be very happy for you to offer me communication support and fundraising support and advocacy support, but what I really want is the funding. And I want the funding with the minimal ties and trust in the organization. Now, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense kind of theoretically, right? If you believe in an organization, if you've done your due diligence, then why don't you just back the organization? But of course, there are constraints. And then I find at the Freedom Fund where we get to experience both sides of the coin, because we raise funding, right? We raised about 250 million over the last 10 years. And then we give the vast bulk of that funding to other organizations. So I'm raising money to get it to the organizations that can make the greatest impact. And then I bring that mindset and think, well, okay, well, I want trust-based funding. So we have to be as trust-based as we can with our partners, right? But we think, okay, but we want you to collaborate. So trust-based funding is about an attitude and approach. It's not that unless you give funding that is 100% unrestricted, you are not engaged in trust-based funding. What it means is, if you're a funder, think of the ways you can just make it easier for your grantee, right? Think about the application process. Don't force an organization to provide you with a huge amount of information that you're actually not going to review in really complicated forms. You can really simplify the process, right? For some of our small grantees, like organizations led by survivor of trafficking, we let them put in a video application. Right? Then we'll do our own due diligence, but we'll do the due diligence. We won't force them to give us all the information. So, so trust-based is a mindset of easing the process, ideally giving as much as you can in unrestricted forms. But even if you can't give unrestricted, you can be a lot more responsive. You can reduce the reporting burdens. You can just make it easier. You can kind of get out of the way, right, of your grantee so they can go and do the job well.
Yeah, I love that you use the word mindset, because you are right. We talk about this a lot, but I haven't really heard anyone articulate it quite that way. Reducing the friction of participation and making it. God, you're right. Just the application and the forms and these portals and the information that you have to go forward with. And you're right. Wondering, is anyone ever going to really look at this?
Exactly. And it's fine to ask for information. You've just got to be thoughtful about it. And why not ask for the annual report, which has most of the, the last 3 years of financials. That's easy, the 990s, but don't ask us then to, because funders should have the resources to do this. I mean, this is the thing about being particularly big foundations. And there are a lot that are very thoughtful on this basis. We are fortunate to have a number of funders who give us unrestricted funding, multi-year funding, and it's just such a blessing. But I would encourage everyone to think about how they can just make it easier and step a little bit more out of the way of their grantees.
Right. And having the discussion like we are today is a big part of this, because it's still, I think, especially, for donors and charitable institutions that are funding things, it's hard to step back. Because it's somebody's job in essence, or it's somebody's sense of, this is how I'm stewarding the money. I need to do this. I need to ask these questions. And so I love that you said this. You have another thing that I think that is a lesson you're probably learning every day, and that's survivor leadership. What does that look like to you, Nick?
Well, so as I said, we work to serve these very vulnerable populations that are often singled out for exploitation because of difference, right? Because they are a religious minority or an ethnic minority, or women and girls suffer disproportionately from slavery and trafficking, right? So it's vulnerability. And then when you are working with them, of course, you want expertise. Well, who is more expert than someone who has experienced firsthand what exploitation looks like. So for us, survivor leadership, lived experience, is about drawing on the expertise of those that are closest to the issues we care about. And again, I think that's a no-brainer. I think, there are lots of discussions, even now in the US, right, as we speak, discussions about diversity, equity, inclusion. But for me, it's about finding those that have the deepest knowledge and making sure that they are plugged into what you do. And so it's not an either-or situation. We have survivors at our organization, survivors in leadership roles, and then we have a mix of other staff and expertise. It's not that you only have to staff up with survivor leaders, or and then in our own granting work, we seek out survivor-led organizations because of that, to support them, because they are extremely well placed to support their communities, raise awareness, share information. So for me, it's just trying to find out those who are closest to the issue and have perhaps the greatest knowledge about the issue, and drawing on that expertise.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's brilliant across the board in leadership. If you're running a for-profit organization, let's say you're in a finance department, you would look for somebody that has experience in that knows how to, do bookkeeping and accounting, and has been educated in that and experienced it. And so, I think it's a natural thing in the for-profit, not so much in the nonprofit. So I appreciate you linking that forward. I imagine that this also kind of tags into frontline partners. What does that look like to you? And how often, being in London and then working with people from around the globe, is there a disconnect? I mean, how do you link back up and learn from a frontline partner so that they can do their work? And you said this beautifully, so that the funder can get out of the way and get work done. Like, what does that look like to you?
Well, it starts with an ethos, doesn't it? It starts with a kind of and for us, the ethos is that the frontline partners are at the center of the work. Because, if we are working in rural India or in the Amazon in Brazil, right, it's the communities, and then it's the organizations that represent them that have the deepest knowledge and that can make the difference, right? I can't go into the Amazon and meet with regional officials there and say, this is what needs to be done. And I have no credibility. Right? I don't know the issue in the way that they know it and the communities know it. But frontline groups, grassroots, community-based organizations have that expertise. I mean, you would probably know this so much better than me, but in the US, right, it's organizations that are closest to the communities that are being affected, that have the deepest knowledge and can have the greatest impact. And we listen to them. We listen to the representatives of the communities that we are trying to serve. And so we have a strong ethos about that, but it comes down to culture. It comes down to purpose, right? We've just refreshed our strategy, and we've kind of doubled down on putting the frontline partners at the center of the work that we do. And it's hugely impactful. And I've got the research and the data to show the kind of impact that our work has had through our frontline partners, because you can come from the bottom up and you can drive change. We're working in India, and one state, the scale is mind-boggling, but the state of Uttar Pradesh has 200 million people. That's the state. And we work with frontline partners who go and lobby the ministers and the government officials there with great success. And so the change and the scale of the change when they change government policy in that state is just mind-blowing. And it can't happen from us coming from London or from the US. It has to happen in an indigenous way. And when you do it well, it's tremendously impactful.
Yeah, I love it. Well, this has been such a powerful conversation. And I mentioned to you in the green room, it was going to go by fast. And indeed, it has. Nick Grono, CEO of the Freedom Fund. You can learn more about the Freedom Fund's work at freedomfund.org. But more importantly, check out Nick's book, How to Lead Nonprofits, Turning Purpose into Impact to Change the World. Some amazing lessons from you. You've been on both sides, all sides of these issues, and I just really have enjoyed your visit on the Nonprofit Show today, Nick. Thank you so much.
Julia, thanks for having me on your wonderful show. And I so appreciate what you're doing, and your relentlessness in kind of bringing knowledge and expertise to a much broader audience. It's really powerful.
Well, thank you. You know what? It's powerful because I get to meet with people like you every day. This is how I start my day, and it's incredibly humbling. And when it gives you hope when you get to meet and chat with somebody like yourself, right? When we see that there are people of all different walks of life doing really important things, I think this is one of those times when it makes the unpleasantness that's going on seem manageable, right?
Right.
And so, everybody, check out How to Lead Nonprofits, Turning Purpose into Impact to Change the World by our guest today, Nick Grono, CEO of the Freedom Fund. What a pleasure it has been, as I said earlier. We are here supported because of at the pleasure of our partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that join us day in and day out, so that we can have these amazing conversations as we've had with Nick today. All right, my friend, you get to go enjoy dinner because it's in London time. Your day is ending. My day is just starting. And hopefully we will come back together again and have you on the Nonprofit Show at another time.
That would be wonderful. Thanks again, Julia. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. Hey, everybody, as we end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we leave with this mantra. It means different things to me every day that I say it. And today, yet again, it means something else. And the message is this: to stay well so you can do well. See you back here tomorrow.